Hear that? That's the sound of speechless. Like when you give her an unforgettable gift from Jared the Galleria of Jewelry. Whether it's one of the hundreds of new pieces in our collection, one of the exclusive pieces you can only find at Jared, or a custom piece we create just for you, Jared is the place to find the gift.
I love it.
That takes her breath away. And that's why he went to Jared.
Looking to up your bourbon game? Larceny Wheated Bourbon is the key. It's an award-winning small batch bourbon made with more wheat for a smoother taste. Get caught in the act. Larceny Wheated Bourbon, Bardstown, Kentucky. 46% alcohol by volume. Think wisely, drink wisely.
Our new presenting sponsor is ZipRecruiter. Are you looking for a smarter way to hire great candidates? With ZipRecruiter, 80% of employers who post a job get a quality candidate to the site in just one day. Try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/06010. That's ZipRecruiter.com/06010.
You're using Drake's name in vain, but you are a fair weather Drake fan.
I'm not a Drake fan.
That's it.
Drake fan.
You are a fair weather.
You're in the 06010. Never gonna hustle in case you didn't know. Matthew Berry, TMR.
You guys go ahead. Give me grief for being on SportsCenter for 45 seconds. I think you could do better than me because I don't think you could.
Jailbait, Field Yates.
You're terrible at hashtag improv. At Field Yates. At Field Yates.
Stephania Bell.
Oh, don't let Barry convert you.
Secret Squirrel, Daniel Dodd.
Make it happen.
Mediocre fantasy advice.
You're older than people realize.
That never stops.
Loyal 06010 listener.
Welcome in to Monday's show. It's Fantasy Focus Football Podcast. Field Yates and Matthew Berry. Stephania Bell, good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
It's a good morning for at least Stephania. Stephania is over the moon happy right now. Her 49ers are now 4-1 in their past 5 games.
And they're on a 3-0 winning streak.
Now here's my question to you. Are you legit happy just in the sense, obviously you're excited because wow, Garoppolo's everything we thought he might be and frankly more. Like he's been nothing short of magical, on a, and by the way, and that's with learning probably a third of the playbook, if that. So, you think about this guy getting a full season under Kyle Shanahan and, whether it's Garcon or adding some more weapons in the offseason. So the future is certainly bright in San Francisco. I understand that. But are you happy that they won? I would think, look, you guys aren't going anywhere this year. So wouldn't you have rather lost that game to Tennessee and again get a better draft pick?
No, not at all. Because I watched what Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch did with the draft this past year.
Oh yeah.
And they've made some pretty good moves, and I think I don't think this notion that winning a couple games is going to completely jeopardize that. Not worried at all. Not worried.
How could you possibly advocate for losing?
Yeah,
listen, as a Redskins fan, I'm a Redskins fan. It ain't our year. I'd rather have the better draft pick. I'd rather have the better draft pick.
I think it's a loser's mentality.
It is. And by the way, ask our friend Keith. They've had the top draft picks for years, and how's that working out?
I don't think
it's all who makes them and what they do with them. Am I right, Field?
I agree with you on that one, Stephania. It's not the picks. It's what you make of the picks. And yeah, I think it's a good thing for the 49ers to win. And I was, I was in Kansas City in 2009 and we went to Denver in the final weekend of this season. And we went on the road in a game that Denver was not in the playoffs, but we went there and we pummeled the Broncos. And I will not forget that locker room feeling after that game. And everybody felt like that was the start of something.
Right.
The way we had finished that season was going to catapult us to the good things ahead.
And it's beyond, you get the locker room, you get the fan base, which has been largely absent. They haven't been able to fill the seat. They got all these people who own seats who aren't showing up. You're starting to get the buzz in the Bay Area. Hey, when you're 49ers who were dynasty
so what you're saying
guys.
So I see what you're saying. This makes sense now. Now I finally understand it. Now I understand the field. This is what she's saying. As you're saying, we have all these people that own seats, but they don't show up. So this is exciting because now the fair weather fans have a reason to come to 49er games. I get it. I understand, Stephania. That makes sense.
Not at all where I was going.
Stephania Bandwagon Bell. I get it. All of a sudden, haven't heard a lot about her talking up Miami and their bowl chances recently. You haven't, right? Secret 12?
Well, we know what bowl they're going to.
I know, I'm just saying, like, it's been a lot.
Whatever.
Recently, it's been a lot about the 49ers. In the middle of the season, when the Miami Hurricanes were doing so well, it was a lot about them.
That's right. Well, you want to.
I haven't heard much about Princeton. How's their football team doing? But like when they're like, those years when they have like a good basketball team and they're in the NCAA.
So many winning teams,
many teams.
The winning culture is
how
everywhere.
Many jerseys do you have? You have like 100 jerseys? Do you have 150 jerseys in your closet? Like how many? You're like Justin Bieber. It doesn't matter.
I am
You're
not at all like Justin Bieber. Let's be very clear.
Stephania Bell is the Drake of our podcast.
Stop.
Rewind. Fantasy news from the National Football League. This is the instant replay.
You guys listening right now can't see it at home, but Stephania is wearing.
Started from the bottom. Now we're here.
Oh, what was that? What was that? Oh, Drake.
Drake, obviously.
Yeah, right. Took me a second. I was just like, well, I didn't know.
Because you're not familiar. You're using Drake's name in vain, but you are a fair weather Drake fan.
I'm not a Drake fan.
That's it.
Drake fan.
You are a fair weather.
No, because I'm not a Drake fan. I've never seen. I actually have seen Drake in concert once, but not by choice. And
whoa.
No, I have nothing.
Hey.
Hang on, I have nothing against Drake. I'm just. It's not
what
my.
What against Canadians? First is Justin Bieber.
No,
now
I got nothing
Drake.
against. I have nothing. I have nothing against
Matthew Berry
Drake.
hates Canada.
No. I went to a. It's whatever. I went to an NBA All-Star thing.
ESPN Radio. Breaking news.
What is it?
Matthew Berry hates Canada, according to sources filling the situation.
Stop it. I do not hate Canada. I hate the two of you. I want to be very clear about this. If you're asking me, who do I like between Canada and you two nudnicks? It's Canada all the time. Give me some maple syrup. Listen, I have nothing against Drake. I'm just saying, not my style of music. Talented guy, obviously. I was at an NBA All-Star party where he performed, so that's the one time I've seen him in concert. But I didn't go. I went to the party. I didn't necessarily go.
Where are we going with this?
All I'm going to say is, yeah. Where we're going with this is that I'm not a Drake Fairweather fan. You, however, Stephania Bell, like I was going to say, Stephania Bell is wearing a bunch of Star Wars gear because it was the #1 movie at the box office. So that, Stephania Bell jumps on that bandwagon. It doesn't matter what.
She's not. I do think you hate Canada. I love Canada. I had some great Canadian beer recently. Really good. Fernie's Brewing Company. Anyway, let's get to the football.
Field always good with the beer plug.
Always good with the beer plug.
It allows me to
find a way to get it in. That's nice.
Break off the conversation and get us right back into football.
Well done, Field.
Drunk Field.
It's 8:10. I'm not.
How many beers does it take to get you drunk? Because you drink a lot of beer, so I think your tolerance is high. On the other hand, you weigh 130 pounds. Right. So I would think like literally half a beer would knock you out.
Well, the thing about beer is like it depends on the alcohol content, right? Like
sure, of course.
Some beers,
that's what I'm asking. How many beers does it take you to get you loopy?
Depends. It depends on if it's a double IPA with 9% alcohol, those things can.
It's also
he's
in training. He's in training.
How many
for
PBRs
Run.
Like just straight PBRs?
I can guzzle some PBRs.
Would you do? Here's a question. As people, by the way, it's the holiday. It's the holidays. It's a season of giving. So for those of you who haven't yet but still want to, check out runfieldrun.com.
Correct.
And support our friends Field and Chapin in their Boston Marathon run as they raise money for the Jimmy V Foundation for cancer research. If we get you to that 30,000 goal, which is the new goal that we've set.
Very close. Yeah.
Yeah. Beer mile? Beer? I mean, like, would you chug a beer every mile? A beer marathon? Beerathon?
That's a lot. That's 26 beers.
Are you looking for a new co-host next year? Because I would not survive if I ran 26 beers. If I ran 26 miles of the beer mile variety.
I'm not looking for a new co-host.
Gotcha.
Not the way I would phrase it necessarily.
Got it.
All right, well, let's get to the football.
All right, we had two games on Saturday night. They began, or Saturday afternoon and then evening. It began with Chicago and Detroit. It's week 16 of the season, or it's almost week 16 of the season. We're going to streamline our process here. We do not need to account for every single player in every single game. We're going to give you the information you need to know.
You're either in the finals.
Yep.
And you know sort of who brought you to the dance, as it were.
Yep.
Or you're not, and you're just listening for the nonsense.
Right.
We will, as we get further towards the end of the season here, we'll do some Dynasty and Keeper talk in Week 17 especially, but...
We got a lot of stuff that we'll cover over the next couple of weeks that will help you looking ahead. But For the Bears, Jordan Howard was disappointment, 10 rushes for 37 yards and 4 catches for 26 yards.
He drives me up a wall. Like this was a great matchup with the Lions.
Yeah, and so I don't think it's him though, is it?
3 yards a carry. Some of it was him, some of it was a usage. They just didn't, Detroit came to play. Give the Lions credit.
I sure did. So 10.3 points for Jordan Howard on Saturday afternoon. He was a player that probably was going to be...
Made my love list and... Ugh.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah.
Kendall Wright, though, in consecutive games has been a big-time factor for this Chicago passing offense. 7 catches for 81 yards and 13 targets. So for the past 2 weeks, he's got 24 targets and 17 catches for 188 yards. All right, in a deeper league, Matthew, could you see Kendall Wright being a flex consideration in a finals matchup? It's tough, but, desperate times call for desperate measures.
Yeah, I suppose I think he could potentially be. I wouldn't feel super confident about it, but you're in a deeper league. You've just lost Antonio Brown.
Right.
You're sitting there going like, oh boy, I need somebody. So here's a guy that's gotten a lot of usage and certainly a matchup that does not scare you at home against the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, he's on the waiver wire column for this week in the very deep section because, again, this time of the season, don't overthink things too much.
Yeah, 24 targets over the last 2 weeks is 24 targets over the last 2 weeks.
For the Lions, Matthew Stafford, another good day, 237 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, good for 17 fantasy points. The 2 wide receivers, though, were just okay. Golden Tate, 3 catches, 33 yards, 6.3 points in PPR scoring. And Marvin Jones, 3 catches for 85 yards, north of 11 points. Not a massive day for either one of those players, and a kind of quiet day overall for this offense. That defense had 3 picks of Mitch Trubisky. That really was the story of the day for Detroit.
Yeah, I agree. And, so Chicago's defense has kind of played tough all year long. Tate did not have a great game against them in the previous matchup either. So, they've done a nice job against him. As it is, what are you going to do? They are at Cincinnati, a Bengals team that seems to have sort of phoned it in for the season. So
Very nice
I believe better days are ahead for all of the Lions pass catchers. 3 for 85 is fine with Marvin Jones, but whatever. Ebron gets one of the scores. TJ Jones gets one of the scores. It was just, kind of one of those fluky games.
Eric Ebron rounding into form at just the right time.
Of course. Just soon enough so that people can write, this is the year Eric Ebron breaks out columns once again. Right. Or they could just dust off the ones that they've had for the last 4 years and just update the dates.
That's right.
Yeah.
2018. It's coming your way sooner rather than later. The Chiefs and the Chargers play on Saturday night at Arrowhead. Thank you, Starfania. The Chiefs waxed the Chargers. This game, 30-13 was the final. On the Chargers side, kind of a quiet night offensively for the entire offense, not named Melvin Gordon.
Yeah.
Gordon led the team with 6 catches, led the team with 91 receiving yards, also had 19 rushes for 78 yards and a touchdown. A stud season for him. When Keenan Allen has just 10.4 fantasy points and it feels like a massive disappointment, that tells you how good he has been of late. Also a bit banged up, Stefania.
Yeah, carted off the field late in the game, so this got everybody nervous. And I felt a little bit guilty, to be honest, because Mina Kimes had tweeted about the amazing season that Keenan Allen was having, and I responded, and no sooner did that happen than Keenan Allen was carted off the field.
Wow.
Exactly.
So, it's you and Mina.
I've been praising the fact that he's been able to stay healthy so far this year. Apparently it's his back that's bothering him. The good news is he was up and walking around the locker room, seemed to be in good spirits after the game. So no specifics on the injury, but it sounds like it may be not as severe as it initially looked.
And how about Hunter Henry, the tight end, who also was a little banged up in this game?
Right, and leaves with what they call an undisclosed injury. Now, oftentimes that's a head injury situation, but you're not going to get anything from the Chargers until their first report this week.
Which should be Wednesday because they're back on a normal Sunday game schedule.
Correct.
Phillip Rivers really disappointed in a key spot. Second game this season against Kansas City, he has had 3 interceptions. He gets just 7.1 fantasy points. For the Chiefs, your ride or die was back, Matthew, and he was back in a good way.
It was amazing. It was amazing. It's just like, where was this in the middle of the season? Like, it was his end of the year numbers are going to look fantastic, but it's so weird how it's been all bunched up at the start of the season and at the end of the year.
Well, it's helped Kansas City.
He was brutal for a 9-game stretch there. Not his fault.
Right. But he was terrific on Saturday night, 24 rushes, 155 yards and a touchdown, 7 catches for 51 yards and a touchdown, 39.6 points in PPR scoring for Kareem Hunt. For the Chiefs, they kind of streamlined things over these past couple of games, right? It's the 4 names you need to know. Kareem Hunt, awesome. Tyreek Hill, again, awesome. 5 catches for 88 yards and a long touchdown. Travis Kelce, 6 for 46 And then Alex Smith, 18.5 fantasy points. Another functional night for him at quarterback.
Yeah, it was a nice game here. Tyreek Hill got behind the defense for one big one, and Alex Smith hit him in stride. That particular play wins me a season-long board bet.
Correct.
There on Tyreek Hill.
Congratulations
and,
to you.
And the other thing here that helped is the Kansas City Chiefs defense played really well, which obviously then goes to game flow, and it's one of the reasons why Kareem Hunt was able to get 31 touches in this game.
Right. So the Chiefs now have an 8-6 record. If they win one of their final two games, they clinch the AFC West. The Chargers need the Chiefs to lose both of their games and win both of their games to the Chargers to have a chance to take that division. Let's get to the Sunday games, and we begin in Western New York, where the Bills win 24-16 over the Miami Dolphins. But the Dolphins have two players that are absolute studs when it comes to fantasy football. Kenyon Drake, 23.3 points, 16 rushes for 78 yards and a touchdown, plus 6 catches for 35 yards on 11 targets. What a revelation he has been.
21 or more fantasy points now in 3 straight games. Here's the list of other running backs that have done that this season, just this entire season.
Okay.
Forget about right now in the playoffs when you need them. But just this season, the running backs that have had 3 straight games of at least 23 or more fantasy points, I think I said 21, 23 or more fantasy points in 3 straight games. Alvin Kamara, Le'Veon Bell, Todd Gurley, Kareem Hunt.
Pretty good company, huh?
That's it. And so it's happening at the right time here for Kenyon Drake. He's scored now in 3 of his last 4 games. You watch this game, to be candid, a lot of this came in junk time.
Sure, it did.
But it all counts.
It definitely does, and the volume has been there. And until Damian Williams returns, you expect that volume to persist.
And I don't even care if Damian Williams returns. I mean, nothing personal against Damian Williams, but honestly, I don't know how. Enfield, you can talk to this as somebody who's been in the front office and has been around NFL teams. Like, again, we talk about this, the politics of the locker room. Kenyon Drake ain't going back to being a timeshare after what he's done.
However, if Damian Williams comes and plays and takes away 5 total touches,
sure,
that definitely has a little bit of an impact on Kenyon Drake, who might crack the top 10 rankings for running backs this week if Damian Williams looks unlikely to play in that game against Kansas City.
They are at Arrowhead on Sunday.
Jarvis Landry had 10 catches for 99 yards. He continues his streak with at least 5 catches in every single game this season. For the Bills, it's all about LaShawn McCoy, who had a touchdown on the ground and also through the air. He looked great yesterday, pretty good on the ground, really good in the air for LaShawn McCoy. Helped this offense do enough to win, and part of it was because Tyrod Taylor also played really well. He looked, to me, Stephania, I don't know about fully healthy, but really close to it.
Healthy enough, and he passed the eye test. That was the concern, was mobility, and could he move around the field? So the rushing yards were important to me. He had 6 rushes for 42 yards. That told me what I needed to know about him. And Charles Clay, I'll just bring him up because he's the other injury question. Much more involved with Tyrod Taylor back.
Yep, 5 catches for 68 yards on 9 targets for Charles Clay.
It's amazing, just real quickly, it's amazing to think. By the way, I believe if the playoffs started today, the Bills would be the 6th seed.
Oh, they sure would be.
Yeah. And it's unbelievable to think that, like, just a couple weeks ago, Sean McDermott was like, you know what? We think we've got a better shot with Nathan Peterman. And what are you going to do? Anyway, nice game here for Tyrod Taylor. For our purposes, listen, they're at New England next week. I don't know that you wanted, I could see him as a streamer.
There are other better quarterback streaming options that are widely available on ESPN.com that we'll discuss at length later on in the show.
For Week 16, worth noting, though, if you play in an ESPN Standard League, which goes all the way to the end of Week 17, he's at Miami in Week 17. His last 3 games against the Dolphins, 25.2 fantasy points.
26.2, even better. How about that?
Did I misread it? Yeah, 26, sorry.
Kelvin Benjamin leaves this game. He goes in and out again. It feels like that knee is a legitimate problem every single week.
We talked about it on the show. He has a meniscus tear. It's not going to heal itself. This is, yes, he can play through it. They're comfortable with that notion that you could address it if you need to in the offseason. It looks like something will ultimately happen because he's not himself.
Right.
But this is what you can expect. It's not going to get better.
2 catches for 20 yards for him. I would not advocate starting him if you make it to the finals. The Ravens hand the Browns their 14th loss of the season in 14 tries. And big days from Joe Flacco and Ben Watson. The takeaway here is, if you're a tight end facing Cleveland, good opportunity to start that player. Watson goes 4 catches, 74 yards, and a touchdown here, Matthew. The gift that keeps on giving, that Browns defense to opposing tight ends.
There's no question about it. If you're just looking for streamers, it always seems to work out that Cleveland is the place to look. Congratulations to our own Keith Lipscomb.
Mike
For me, the biggest disappointment here was Alex Collins. You and I played each other in the Podcast Celeb League semifinals. Alex Collins, one of my running backs here, and just didn't seem to show up here. 12 rushes, just 19 yards. He was involved in the passing game a little bit, 5 for 33, but, despite getting 17 touches, once again, it's his 5th straight week with it, just didn't do much with it. It was a tough game here. Cleveland, I'll give the Browns credit. They did come to play some run defense in this one.
They sure did. They had a great run defense at the beginning of the season. It sort of tapered off in the middle of the season, but it was better, at least specifically against Alex Collins yesterday.
Just couldn't find room to run.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Mike Wallace had 6 catches for 89 yards on 10 targets. He's been pretty good the last 3 games. 14 catches for 277 yards. And his role might continue to be a busy one because Jeremy Maclin left this game early on with a knee injury.
Yeah, Jeremy Maclin out with a knee. It's sort of been banged up intermittently across the season between his back and his knee. Mike Wallace came into the game as questionable because of his ankle, but he put those concerns to rest.
Sure did.
Yeah. Buck Allen gets a decent amount of work here, 13 for 70, he ultimately 14 but it was mostly in, clock killing mode late. I wouldn't read too much into it. Alex Collins remains the running back you want in Baltimore.
For the Browns, not a whole lot here, guys. Duke Johnson goes over 15 points because he had 7 rushes for 23 yards and a touchdown. Isaiah Crowell had 4 catches to help get him over 10 points in fantasy. Josh Gordon, 5 for 47 on 11 targets. So the volume is there, but again, quarterback play is sketchy at best as Deshaun Kaiser managed just 3.3 fantasy points. And it's a good Ravens defense. So, disappointing for Josh Gordon, but probably didn't crater your value, or his value did not crater your lineup this week in the semifinals.
Yeah, they are at Chicago next week. The Bears, an interesting streaming defense for next week. I would assume they would make the waiver wire column.
Interesting. I don't know. We'll see. I didn't have a ton of waiver wire streaming defensive options this week.
Yeah.
The Bengals were pathetic, to put it kindly, on Sunday. We got a report early in the day from Adam Schefter that Marvin Lewis, their head coach, would leave the organization after this year as the head coach. 15 years there, that tenure will be over. But for Cincinnati, it looked like a team that had given up. 34-7 was the final. They scored a late touchdown from Giovanni Bernard. They took Andy Dalton out of this game, put in A.J. McCarron. Pathetic all the way around. A.J. Green held to 2 catches for 30 yards. Andy Dalton had 113 yards, 2 interceptions. Just awful. There's nothing to say here.
Well, listen, give some credit to the Vikings defense. The Vikings defense played terrific, and Xavier Rhodes had a really nice game here against A.J. Green ultimately. But, yeah, they just, I think maybe they heard the report, or the Bengals. What happens when you trust the Bengals, Field?
You know what happens.
No, I know. I know what happens. I'm asking you.
Giovanni Bernard, 14 rushes, 30 yards, and a touchdown, the only fantasy-relevant outing for the Bengals on Sunday. Jerick McKinnon and Latavius Murray both were very good for the Vikings. We had a board bet.
Yep.
I had Jerick McKinnon. You had Latavius Murray. McKinnon wins 20.8 to 17.4.
Yeah, the idea that McKinnon gets 7 for 114 on 7 targets in the passing game. It's like, come on.
Yeah, well.
I knew Latavius Murray would probably get into the end zone, which he does, and I thought McKinnon would be involved in the passing game. I didn't think he'd be involved that much. He actually leads the team in targets. He was struggling there for a little while, Case Keenum, just fantasy-wise. It took a while to get going. They got the rushing touchdown. Ultimately, Case Keenum has another nice game here. 19.4 fantasy points now. 4 straight games with multiple touchdown passes. 7 straight games with 17 or more fantasy points for Case Keenum here. Part of the problem, Field, is they got up big early and it was never a threat, which is one of the reasons why when you look at the box score, that's why Adam Thielen just didn't have a lot of love in this game. There was no need to go to him.
No need to, but Case Keenum, as you mentioned, was red hot. 20 for 23, 236 passing yards, and 2 touchdowns. Stephon Diggs found the end zone yesterday. And how about Kyle Rudolph, who went from, according to head coach Mike Zimmer, out on Saturday to doubtful, Stephania, to questionable, to playing.
And we talked about this on the show, that he might not get a ton of yardage, but that he would be a big physical presence in the red zone and potentially an outlet for Case Keenum. And look at his stats. 2 catches for 17 yards, but he gets the touchdown,
Yep.
So I think 2 for 2 on the targets. He did what he needed to do to provide them with that option in the offense. So I expect that he'll be better by next week because of the fact that he obviously picked up so well within 2 days. But again, limited yardage, but obviously still a scoring threat.
Yeah, good enough. And certainly, we, on Sunday, on Fantasy Football Now, we talked about it. Listen, there's so few steady options at tight end. You'd love to see Kyle Rudolph be fully healthy, but even at not fully healthy, he made good with 9.7 fantasy points. The Jets hung tough against the New Orleans Saints. 31-19 was the final. A late touchdown from Mark Ingram sort of sealed this game and made it even more out of reach. But for the Jets in the first game with no Josh McCown, it was Bryce Petty as the starter, and Robbie Anderson was a player that everybody was kind of concerned about, Matthew. Does his value immediately take a nosedive? The answer was no, not entirely. He had 12 targets, 5 catches, 40 yards.
We had talked about this on Friday's show that previously, the year before, there'd been a little bit of a thing between Robbie Anderson and Bryce Petty towards the end of last season, and we thought that might be able to continue. We also thought they would have to throw against New Orleans. We thought there'd be some junk time, and frankly, there wasn't that much junk time because give the Jets credit. They hung tough with New Orleans for much of this game. But to your point, 12 targets is 12 targets. Robbie Anderson doesn't get much. The only problem is that next week they're home against the Chargers. Yeah. Another good secondary. So, Robbie Anderson kind of still in that wide receiver 3 range for me.
These Jets running backs are just impossible to size up. Bilal Powell goes 13 rushes for 44 yards and a touchdown. He was the best Jets running back on the field, I guess. Well, maybe not. Eli McGuire, 4 rushes for 24 yards. He also caught a touchdown pass, so his day ends up being the most fruitful from a fantasy perspective. And then Matt Forte gets 7 rushes. It's just a matter of you got 3 separate players.
It's a three-headed monster that you're just going to avoid. Another bad game for Austin Seferian-Jenkins. He was a thing there for a while, but I think if you haven't already, welcome to Dumpsville.
Yeah. 3 catches, 28 yards for Jermaine Kearse as well. His value clearly impacted by the absence of Josh McCown. We just mentioned it. Mark Ingram had a late rushing touchdown to seal this victory, or to, I guess, further seal this victory for New Orleans. 32.1 fantasy points for Ingram, 12 rushes, 74 yards, 2 touchdowns, 5 receptions, 77 yards. Alvin Kamara, his running mate, goes 12 for 44 on the ground, 6 catches, 45 yards, and a touchdown. The best running back duo in the NFL was exactly that on Sunday afternoon.
People are still asking, can I start both running backs?
Of course.
Yes.
Why are they still asking?
Yeah, I was going to say, send them a thank you note when they win your championship.
Because I think people feel so weird about starting 2 players on a team. I've never totally understood that. It's not like the team knows and they're going to give one away to one and take them from the other.
But, I think we can move on. I mean, it's Ingram, it's Kamara, it's Michael Thomas, it's Drew Brees.
I was going to say, if you woke up this morning thinking to yourself, 24.3 fantasy points for Mike Thomas, that's awesome. Good thing you didn't watch the game because he could have had more. He was robbed.
I know what I have now on a roster. Touchdowns. Oh my goodness.
Are you in need of great talent for your business but short on time? You don't have to look to get lost in a huge stack of resumes to find your perfect hire. You just need the right tools, smarter tools. With ZipRecruiter, you can post your job to over 100 of the web's leading job boards with just one click. So you can rest easy knowing your job is being seen by the right candidates. Then, ZipRecruiter puts its smart matching technology to work, actively notifying qualified candidates about your job within minutes of posting, so you receive the best possible matches. That's why ZipRecruiter is different. Unlike other hiring sites, ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on the right candidates finding you. It finds them. No wonder 80% of employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site in just one day. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. Find out today why ZipRecruiter has been used by growing businesses of all sizes and industries to find the most qualified job candidates with immediate results. And right now, our listeners can post jobs with ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/06010. That's ZipRecruiter.com/06010. One more time. To try it for free, go to ZipRecruiter.com/06010.
Hear that? That's the sound of speechless. Like when you give her an unforgettable gift from Jared the Galleria of Jewelry. Whether it's one of the hundreds of new pieces in our collection, one of the exclusive pieces you can only find at Jared, or a custom piece we create just for you, Jared is the place to find the gift.
I love it.
That takes her breath away. And that's why he went to Jared.
Seeing your team win is thrilling. Watching them win in overtime is even better. And the best of all, enjoying some award-winning Larceny wheated bourbon while you cheer them on. Larceny is made with more wheat for a smoother taste. Our master distillers hand-select only the finest barrels for a true small batch bourbon. Get caught in the act. Unlock the smoothness of Larceny bourbon. Larceny Bourbon, Bardstown, Kentucky. 46% alcohol by volume. Think wisely, drink wisely.
It's New York Times bestselling author Matthew Berry with another self-serving, self-indulgent, all-about-me promo.
If you don't have the Fantasy Life app, the free, 100% free Fantasy Life app, you are missing out. The alerts continue to just absolutely crush it. A lot of news over this past weekend that you found out first, frankly, from the Fantasy Life app. We have an algorithm that tracks like pretty much every single beat reporter, everyone out there. So as soon as something gets reported, you immediately know it. It doesn't mean you have to be on Twitter refreshing yourself every single second. You just get an alert right to your phone. It's unbelievable. And again, it's free. The community is fantastic in terms of start sit questions. Do you want to do a poll? Do you want to engage with other people that play fantasy football? Ask questions, give advice. A lot of people like to give advice. Here's a chance to show how smart you are and get noticed by the fantasy football community, because it's not just myself, but there are a lot of other people in the industry, if you will, on the app. And the best part, 100% free. Just go to FantasyLifeApp.com, or you look in the App Store on iOS or Android. Our reviews are through the roof. If you don't believe me, you're like, yeah, Barry, whatever. You have a piece of that. Whatever, blah, 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 blah. And then you look at my Twitter feed and you see people that, and you can go through sort of my likes, and you'll see that people have said, like, you know what, Barry, I thought you were just shilling for it, and I sort of ignored it, and finally I was like, fine, I'll give it a try. And I'm like, oh my God, it's awesome. Go on iTunes, read all the reviews about the app. I have a piece of it, but honestly, the guys that run it do an amazing job, and so I'm proud to be associated with it. The Fantasy Life app, just go to FantasyLifeApp.com.
Moving along to the game that a lot of people were watching to see how the Eagles would forge forward without Carson Wentz. What will the results be with Nick Foles under center? The answer, a resoundingly positive, if that's even a word, a resounding and positive performance.
I'll allow it.
Nick Foles, 24 for 38, 237 yards, 4 touchdowns, 25.5 fantasy points. So we start here, Matthew, for the rest of the way, with 2 more games. Can Nick Foles be used as your starter in the championship?
Yeah, I believe so. And it's less of a mark of super confidence in Nick Foles as it is the offense around him, the scheme, and frankly the matchups. He couldn't ask for a better landing spot than playing the Giants. And then you look at who they play coming up. Raiders at home, Cowboys at home. So they've got 2 straight home games against 2 defenses that frankly have struggled so far this year. I think Foles is absolutely a viable streamer the rest of the way.
And how about
we talked about him coming into the week. We thought he was a viable streamer this week.
Sure.
We talked about him a lot on Fantasy Football Now. He made the love list. Nick Foles.
And here's how the rest of the Eagles offensive players looked, by the way. Alshon Jeffrey goes 4 for 49 with a touchdown on 10 targets. That was the most in terms of targets of any player. Zach Ertz, 6 for 56 with a touchdown on 9 targets. Nelson Agholor, 6-7 for 59 with a touchdown on 9 targets as well. So good to see that not only can Nick Foles be a productive quarterback, but the rest of those Eagles players that we've been counting on can stay very much involved and very much in your lineup week to week.
Touchdown now in 3 of his last 4 for Nelson Agholor. I like this on Alshon Jeffrey. He now has 7 straight games with at least 10 points.
Yep.
Double-digit fantasy points in 7 straight games. The only wide receivers with a longer streak this season, Michael Thomas, DeAndre Hopkins. So Alshon Jeffrey very quietly having a nice year and staying healthy, Stephania.
I know. I talked about this yesterday, that he's been on the injury report because of illness, I think, twice now. And it really has only been 1 or 2 appearances the entire season because of an actual injury, and hasn't kept him off the field.
Jay Ajayi had 12 rushes for 49 yards plus 2 catches for 40 yards. We thought maybe they would rely on him more, but the answer has been they continue to throw the football at a high level. I'm going to take this one. This one's my B. Earlier on in the fantasy show this week, I mentioned that Sterling Shepard had a spot on your bench. He had been quiet of late. As a matter of fact, I believe he had just 1 catch in week 14. Well, what happened in week 15? He went crazy. 11 catches for 139 yards and a touchdown. So if you listen to my advice, which was on Monday, my bad. He played much better than I expected him to. He was awesome. As a matter of fact, Eli Manning was awesome. 434 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns. He had 1 interception, 57 passing attempts. Another game where all of a sudden the Giants are playing a ton of offensive snaps. 2 catches for 16 yards, by the way, was the final line for Sterling Shepard in week 14. So he was remarkable if you started him, and only 11% of people on ESPN.com did. You're smiling wide right now as he gets you 30.9 fantasy
To be
points.
fair, though, I mean, he had a hamstring injury, Field, and you know what you saw last week was pretty indicative of the fact that he wasn't 100% healthy, and it's always hard to know if those guys are going to, number one, if he's going to come back and be healthier, and number two, how he's going to be obviously integrated into the offense with that. So there was really no anticipating. A couple of these guys who are coming off of injury, and Greg Olsen will be another one we'll talk about. Sterling Shepard puts up a big day, but hadn't been totally healthy going into it.
And you didn't know how they were going to play against the Eagles. We thought they'd get up a little bit for it, but they moved the ball much more effectively than I think people thought they would. I had Shepard as a wide receiver 3. Yeah, I would just say to you, while you were negative on Shepard, the fact of the matter is that you, and I say this for myself as well, we don't write the headlines. I think sometimes you get alerts, or you see videos, whether it's in the app or on ESPN.com, and I would encourage you to watch the video. Not just because I'm a company man and I'm trying to get those clicks, but because I think, it's tough for the headline writers that are trying to encapsulate a 1.5 or 2-minute video into 10 words.
Right.
And, sometimes context gets lost. So I would encourage you to not really check out the headlines, which we have nothing to do with, and really watch the videos and judge for yourself based on our content.
Wayne Gallman is a rare Week 16 waiver wire ad that might make some sense for your lineup. Over his past 2 games, he's got 20 rushes for 98 yards. He's got 13 catches for 80 yards, a pass-catching phenom out of the backfield at Clemson. He's showing some of that right now for the G-Men. You play in a deeper league? Yeah, he'll be on the radar for Week 16.
They're at Arizona next week. I don't love that particular matchup. I will say this about Gallman, and just real quickly so I'm in a dynasty league where you can keep 13 people. Okay. For as much as you want. And like Wayne Gallman, I was just checking and for some reason somebody dropped Wayne Gallman, which made no sense to me, but someone had dropped Wayne Gallman. They might have needed somebody, somebody that had a different roster construction that was just worried about this year. One of the things that I like to do in that particular league, and I think it's a 12-team league that we've played in since I've been in college, so over 20 years. I play it with my college roommate. So it's a way for us to keep in touch. And so shout out to Chris Lindsay. And so Chris and I, one of the things we like to do, and we're by the way, the back-to-back defending champions of that league. Well, one of the things we like to do is we like to, at this point in the season, sort of look around like, I picked up Wayne Gallman. I'm not starting Wayne Gallman the rest of the way. Yeah. But there's a chance that Wayne Gallman has a significant role on this team next year. I always like to pick up a handful of those guys towards the stretch, that have upside for next year. I'm not worried about this year.
I agree with you on that. As a matter of fact, tomorrow's waiver wire column will include 5 players that are even further off the radar than Wayne Gallman would be this year that might be worth considering for 2018. The Redskins get a win.
Is Mac Hollins one of them? Because I love Mac Hollins.
Were you listening during the pre-show meeting?
No.
Oh, he is. Nice.
Yeah.
He's one of the 5.
He should be.
Anyways, we'll talk about that more tomorrow. Larry Fitzgerald and the Cardinals fall to your Redskins 20-15. Fitz had 5 catches for 60 yards on 10 targets. This is a difficult game to watch in a lot of ways. Both sides failed to bring the offensive firepower, Matthew.
That's the nicest thing I've heard anyone say about that game.
Yeah, pretty ugly all the way around. Blaine Gabbert 16 for 41.
Yeah, Gabbert was brutal.
I mean, just brutal. And Kerwin Williams had 17 rushes for 61 yards. Sort of stuck in the mud running the ball, and then he got hurt as well.
Right, suffered a quad injury reportedly, so that's why he could have touched the ball more than he did. So stay tuned to see how healthy he is going into next week.
Well, and it could be the Elijah Petty show. Yeah. Again, so in a deep league, in a crazy, I know, but if Kerwin Williams were out at home against the Giants, in a deep, like if you're in a 16-team league where you're crazy desperate, or for DFS purposes, maybe there.
Right, I think DFS is where
Elijah Petty.
Personally.
Yeah. You'd like him at home against the Giants if you knew he was going to get 20 touches, which if Kerwin Williams is out, good chance of that.
This felt like a game, like a vintage Week 15 when these two teams have nothing to play for other than just like pride and finding out where they will actually finish in the draft order.
Yep.
For Washington, Kirk Cousins actually finished with 15.8 fantasy points, in part because of a strong opening drive, I believe it was, where he hooked up with Jamison Crowder for a short touchdown pass. So Crowder goes 555 with the touchdown. Kirk Cousins, 15.8 fantasy points. And then Capri Bibbs, activated to the roster in the middle of the week, has a long screen pass for a touchdown. He's a player that's somewhat familiar because of his time previously in Denver, traded to San Francisco this offseason. Not a bad showing for him.
No Chris Thompson, obviously. He's been out for the year. Byron Marshall, who they signed up the Eagles practice squad, also now on IR. So Capri Bibbs, again, just, another body to sort of play that passing down, third down back in Jay Gruden's offense. That play was a thing of beauty. I mean, so Kirk Cousins gets credit for the touchdown pass, but it was like a 3-yard pass. Right. And then Capri Bibbs did the rest.
Samaje Perine disappointed with 14 rushes for 37 yards, and Vernon Davis just 2 catches for 18 yards on Sunday. Maybe the game of the day, or at least the return of the day, was Aaron Rodgers coming back to the Green Bay offense, and how would he look against Carolina? Well, the final score was 31-24 in a very, very fun game. Carolina wins. Aaron Rodgers, the good and the bad. We'll start with the medical, because Stephania, he said after the game he was sore, but again, naked eye evaluation, it felt like he was...
Looked like Aaron Rodgers.
Fine.
Yeah, so I felt like there were a couple things. You always look for, all the medical people are looking for the hit, and do you get back up? And the way he landed, on the right side, had a couple where he had the wrist hit the ground first, a couple where the shoulder hit the ground. He was sort of pile driven in, and every time, there was one time he got where he kind of face planted down, and when he got up, he looked like that one hurt.
Yep.
But every time he came back and he was throwing. So that was the big test, was take the contact and get back up. The other thing I saw, though, and I think this speaks to the strength, the arm strength not fully being there, was him underthrowing more than you expect to see Aaron Rodgers underthrow. So I think a few of those that's going to get better as he gets stronger.
For the first time in 8 years, he threw 3 interceptions in a single game. He was picked off 3 times by that very good Carolina defense that has been, sort of struggling of late against the pass. They showed out yesterday. Rodgers finished with 290 passing yards and 3 touchdown passes, plus 43 rushing yards. So he had 21.9 fantasy points. From a fantasy perspective, he was exactly what
you hope for.
That's what you hope for from Aaron Rodgers. But let's get to the rest of this offense. Davante Adams left this game, Stephania. It's a concussion. Second one he suffered so far this season.
Right. His second of the season, his third in the last 2 years. I thought this was an important one. Thomas Davis hit him. There were a couple things. Thomas Davis is probably going to hear from the league on this one. Left his feet, helmet to helmet. It was pretty easy for the average viewer to spot that this was one of those inappropriate hits. Thomas Davis clearly remorseful on the sideline too. I think that was important to see, because, he knew, it was like the player knew at the time that was not a good thing to do. But obviously concerned for Davante Adams, given the fact that he's had a couple of concussions back to back now.
Yeah, and this is the second time he's been involved in a play that's going to come subject to the NFL's review. We'll see what Thomas Davis' potential punishment could be, but Adams left the game with a concussion. He had 5 catches for 57 yards and a touchdown prior to that. But I think there are a lot of questions, so we'll see whether or not he plays next Sunday against Minnesota. We will cross that bridge later on in the week. But with Aaron Rodgers returning, we thought perhaps Jordy Nelson returns as well, Matthew.
Yeah, I certainly thought he would. He was on my love list.
Yep,
and that is not what happened.
Yeah, but you know what? His stat line would have been way different if Aaron Rodgers hadn't underthrown him on that pass. I think it was in the third quarter.
Could have been like a 75-yard touchdown pass. Exactly. I mean, I can't throw him for him.
If you watch that game, Jordy Nelson was targeted 6 times, had 3 catches. One would have been a big play catch that would have probably added another. I mean, think of it. If it was like 60 yards and a touchdown,
we'd be saying
you'd be talking Jordy Nelson's back. So I think the way he's being looked to in the offense, Jordy Nelson is still going to be relevant here.
Certainly, especially because if Davante Adams were to miss some time. They do play Minnesota next week. You would expect Jordy Nelson to get the Xavier Rhodes treatment, but again, we don't know just yet.
Maybe Randall Cobb will rank high in our rankings. Cobb had 14 targets yesterday, 7 catches for 84 yards, and a brilliant touchdown catch. A player that, I don't want to say it's underutilized, but every time I see him touch the ball, and part of it is because of his stature, maybe they have to kind of protect a player from taking a litany of hits, but Randall Cobb is such a dazzling talent in the open field. 7 catches, 84 yards, and a score for him. Yeah. Jamal Williams, 10 rushes for 30 yards, and no involvement in the passing game. Next up, Minnesota. Watch out there.
It's been a fun run, Jamal Williams, but it would be tough to trust him next week, given what we saw. And credit the Carolina Panthers run defense, who played really, really well in this one.
They sure did. And speaking of Carolina, Cam Newton has this rise to the moment sort of vibe to him, right? And when everybody's talking about Aaron Rodgers and his return, Cam Newton goes out there and throws 242 passing yards, 4 touchdowns. 58 rushing yards. He was unbelievable.
Heading into Monday night, he is the number one quarterback in fantasy for week 15. Just exactly what you want to see in the fantasy playoffs.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this. One of the reasons we were concerned or nervous about him early in the season is the rushing going to come down? We keep hearing about how he was so banged up and they wanted to run him less. 14 for 58 on the ground for Cam Newton here in this
win me
one.
A fancy board bet too.
Yes, I'm sure he will be. 20 points or more in 4 of his last 6. What was the board bet we had with Cam?
DC Live Show made the Kirk Cousins versus Cam Newton board bet. Rest of the run away.
You might want to bleep that because I said
Christian McCaffrey had a big day on Sunday as well. 25.6 points, 6 catches for 73 yards and a touchdown. Not that that's necessarily surprising from Christian McCaffrey, but I want you, if you haven't yet, to go back and watch the film, the clip that is making its way around the internet. Clay Matthews, Cam Newton, pre-snap.
You
missed it. Cam Newton, Clay Matthews, good pre-snap recognition, had an idea of what the play might be from Carolina based off of formation and alignment. Cam Newton sort of jaws back and says, watch this. And it was just great. Watch the real route. Watch the real route.
Right, and
he goes, you've been studying or something.
You're watching film. Good for you. Watch this.
Yeah, it was a pretty awesome moment.
Really good
and then
moment.
Cam calls a shot and delivers. So well done there by both gentlemen. Nothing short of terrific there for Cam
McCaffrey, Cam Newton, and Christian McCaffrey.
Christian McCaffrey.
But Stephania, the story here that I think a lot of people were surprised by, and maybe they shouldn't have been, but maybe they should have been. I don't know. Greg Olsen, 9 catches, 116 yards, and a touchdown on 12 targets. Greg Olsen is a phenomenal talent, one of the best tight ends in football. But we knew that it was going.
We knew it was coming. We just didn't know when.
Right. We didn't know it was going to happen.
You couldn't count on it yesterday based on what you saw last week.
Right.
Every week removed from the surgery, of course he's going to be better. But we just didn't expect him to explode necessarily this week. But now that it's happened,
here's the thing. Now that it's happened once, now that it's happened once, he's going to be, for me at least, ranked accordingly this week. Like he'll be a top probably 5 or 7 tight end. I haven't looked at the matchups or the rankings as of yet, but yes, he will be a starting tight end for me in this week's ranks. Good to see. We know this is a player that has worked immensely hard to make sure he can get back to full strength.
He made my hate list, and people were like, that's what they sound like on Twitter. But
I've always wondered. Yeah,
and I had somebody else saying like, oh, I can't believe I didn't start Greg Olsen, and I'm just like, why would you? He's been brutal. He has not been usable at all. Hang on.
He's had 4 starts.
Understood that he was out, he was on injured reserve, designated to return, et cetera. But for one reason or the other, I think I tweeted this, for one reason or the other, whether it was injury, whether it was leaving the game with injury, whether it was just a poor performance, he has been literally unusable in fantasy for 14 weeks. Unusable in fantasy for 14 weeks, Field. So the fact that he comes out here against a team that coming into this week was top 3 in the NFL in terms of fewest fantasy points allowed to opposing tight ends, what on earth would make you think, you know what, I should start him?
Well,
I get it, but I have no, listen, you make your calls, process over results. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. I get it. He's a talented player, but we had seen nothing up to this point, Field Yates, that would give you confidence in starting him in a week 15 matchup. So I have obviously the call didn't work out. I've got no issue with the call, and I've got no issue with anyone that benched him. You can argue with me.
I'm not arguing with you. No, I'm just, what I'm telling you is that, I understand the frustration for people. I also understand exactly what you've been getting at, which is that, it was a cautious play if you were going to use Greg Olsen in your lineup this past week.
Yeah.
Here's what I would say about the Jacksonville Jaguars. When you're a team that we want to take seriously, you have to win the games that you should win, and when you can do so in convincing fashion, it makes me feel even better about your chances going forward. The Jaguars steamrolled the Texans 45-7.
Dude.
Now the circumstances were obviously tilted.
Jaguars-Rams Super Bowl? Could you imagine? By the way, as insane as that sounds, that's not outside the realm of possibility.
The Jaguars,
I think it's going to be tough to get through New England, but still, Jaguars-Rams Super Bowl.
Defensively, the Jaguars are just that good.
Would be amazing in Minnesota. Jaguars-Rams Super Bowl in Minnesota. They'd be giving away tickets. Hey, you. It'd be like where you were,
on the street.
Right, exactly. Can you walk the streets in New York and they're people are like, yo, free show. And They hand out the pamphlets. They want you to come see a comedy show or something.
I would go in a heartbeat to see that Super Bowl.
Sean McVay.
It would be a great Super Bowl. It would be an amazing. Those are two great teams, but I'm just saying, in terms of and it's of course it's the Super Bowl. I'm exaggerating, but I'm just saying like. In terms of like, it doesn't have the same.
It's like a Pistons Spurs NBA Finals. Like nobody wanted to watch that. They want to watch like high scoring, like LeBron and Kobe go against each other.
Right. I'm just saying Jaguars Rams Super Bowl doesn't have the same, cachet. Je ne sais quoi, if you will, of like Patriots Seahawks. Or Patriots Seahawks. Yeah,
I'm kind of over both Patriots and Seahawks.
I understand. I'm just saying Tom Brady versus Russell Wilson. That would be like, I'm trying to think of another, or Saints Patriots. If the Saints managed to get in,
I like this Rams Jaguars.
I'm just saying. I think it's a possibility. By the way, and I know my friends from Minnesota like, whoa, what do the Vikings have to do to get some love? We're the home team. What do the Vikings have to do to get some love? Because the Vikings have a very legit Super Bowl chance as well.
They sure do. But let's get back to this game, Matthew, where Houston, a quarterback...
does not have a Super Bowl chance.
They do not. But obviously things changed when Deshaun Watson got injured earlier on this year. T.J. Yates stepped in to replace Tom Savage. 12 for 31, 128 yards and a touchdown. But that wasn't we weren't sort of concerned about his quarterback points. It was more about how would DeAndre Hopkins fare. And here's the good news. 13 targets for DeAndre Hopkins, 4 catches, 80 yards, an awesome touchdown catch by DeAndre Hopkins down the field over Jalen Ramsey. Good for him. The dude is just a freak. What a beast DeAndre Hopkins is.
I mean, and this is why we say you start your studs. I know people were like, it's Jacksonville. We said you got to. He's matchup proof, and that's exactly what he did. That's exactly what he did. They are home to the Steelers next week.
On Monday Night Football, of course, as well. I believe it's the final edition of Monday Night Football on ESPN, which will be next week.
You are a company man.
That's correct. The Jaguars are becoming more than just a good defensive story. They're becoming an offensive team that may be someone to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
The defense was great, as we just talked about. But for the offense, Blake Bortles, 21 of 29, 326 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. Now, I know we have a lot of fun at Blake Bortles' expense on this show, and he Bortles his way to fantasy relevance. He's playing well. He's playing at a really high level right now.
I want to give you a list here.
Okay.
What do all these people have in common?
Okay.
Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson,
both
Kirk Cousins,
also good.
Dak Prescott,
really good.
Aaron Rodgers,
awesome.
Blake Bortles.
They're all quarterbacks.
They are all quarterbacks. They are all quarterbacks with at least 4 straight games of 18.5 fantasy points this season. All of them have a 4-game streak of 18.5 fantasy points or more this season. Blake Bortles is currently in the middle of it, and next week is at an improving, but still not super scary 49ers defense.
For the record, though, they are also all right-handed quarterbacks.
It's also true.
Field and I definitely had that.
Facts only there. Facts only for Daniel and I. But
Secret squirrel. Multiple touchdown passes in 3 straight games, and he does it, Stephania, without Marquise Lee for much of this.
Marquise Lee injured his ankle. He had needed help to get off the field in the first quarter. And, we've talked about Marquise Lee playing through knee injury and foot injury, but this is something new. X-rays, according to Adam Schefter, sprained ankle, X-rays initially negative, getting an MRI today on Monday. I think there's still some concern about the significance of the ankle sprain that he suffered. So keep an eye on this.
Not only that, Stephania, but on Friday's show, you made a mention of it, and I'm glad you did, that Leonard Fournette could be in some doubt of playing on Sunday. Well, what happened? He sat on Sunday. My question to you is this. Do we get any sense whether that quad injury will cost him one more game? It seemed like there was some positive buzz towards him returning yesterday, but still a long ways to go.
Right. I think it could be just a 1-week rest. We've already seen them do that with him once, and it sounded like he was eager to try and play, but he said, I know I need to practice Friday in order to be able to go. And that's why Friday, when he didn't practice, we had a pretty good idea he wasn't going to be available. But the fact that he was even hopeful late in the week doesn't make it sound like the injury's that severe.
All right. That's good news there for Leonard Fournette, who we expect to return. In the meantime, with Marquise Lee out, and just because of how he's played recently, Keelan Cole needs to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
3 straight games with at least with a touchdown. He had 7 catches for 186 yards, 9 targets yesterday for Keelan Cole from Kentucky Wesleyan, baby.
Did not know that. The best Wesleyan.
There's like 40 different schools that have Wesleyan in the name around the country. So
they're my favorite.
Wow. That cuts me right to the core.
Well, I call them like I see them. you know, and it's interesting here because we would have. I like D.D. Westbrook coming to this game, and just nothing happens for D.D. Westbrook here. 2 for 21 on just 2 targets. Keelan Cole was wide open. Jaden Mickens, you know, gets 2 touchdowns here, 4 for 61 on 5 targets. I don't know that you can count him. I would agree with you that Keelan Cole suddenly needs to be on your radar here. As for the running backs, it was weird. We suggested on Fansful now that we preferred Chris Ivory to TJ Yeldon, and I think that was the correct call. But Tommy Bohannon, their fullback, vultures 2 different touchdowns here, and a running back that hasn't ever gotten a ton of run. He gets a little bit here, but every time he steps on the field, Corey Grant impresses me.
Well, the funny thing is, I could have said like, yeah, you should be starting TJ Yeldon, and you would say you should be starting Chris Ivory, and we both would have been wrong. You should have been starting Corey Grant and Tommy Bohannon.
It's unbelievable.
But I think that Stephania's point probably renders a lot of this moot, is that it's probably a 1-week rest for Leonard Fournette, who should be back in week 16 against the 49ers.
Yes, sir.
Oh, man. The performance of the day was Mr. Todd Gurley. The Rams do everything.
I have a question, if you don't mind, before you move on. D.D. Westbrook.
Yep.
I was all kinds of hopeful for D.D. Westbrook. What am I doing this week with the performance that you guys just talked about? Keelan Cole.
Yeah.
D.D. Westbrook, where am I?
I want to be, look, I'll be super candid here. So we watch all the games at the same time on Sunday, obviously, right? And I don't know how field you prepare, but then I go back and I read the game reports of the people that were there, and I look at our stats and everything like that. We tape this show at 8 a.m. Monday morning. So I want to go back and really watch this game. You know, I need to watch, you know, these games. You don't get a chance to watch every play of every game by the time we do the Monday show. So I want to go back and watch and exactly look at how they used Keelan Cole. I have some sources in Jacksonville. I want to talk how much of that was based on Marquise Lee went out, and so all of a sudden they're sort of scrambling. Do they have a different role for D.D. Westbrook next week? You know, so I think there's some more research that needs to be done, at least on my part, before I'm willing to say, yes, this guy, no, that guy for week 16.
Stephania mentioned this earlier about Jordy Nelson and how if Aaron Rodgers had put a little bit more air on that ball, he might have a different day. D.D. Westbrook had a play where a defensive pass interference was drawn in the end zone. If he catches that pass as opposed to being, you know, hooked and interfered with,
sure, all
of a sudden the tenor of his day might be a little bit different. So I think there's a chance D.D. Westbrook could still be my highest ranked Jaguars wide receiver this week. A lot of time before we make a decision, though, on week 16 status. Now we move forward to Todd Gurley, who was unbelievable yesterday. Todd Gurley.
So as you guys know, Field Yates and I played each other in the podcast Celeb League. We were in the semifinals. Well, so I was sweating this because I want to beat Field. I want to win this game. You know,
so unlike you.
Yeah. And so like my quarterbacks in that
so
league,
uber competitive in fantasy.
My quarterbacks on this particular team, Phillip Rivers and Aaron Rodgers, and so I was going back and forth. Ultimately, I started Aaron Rodgers. Turned out to be the right call.
So far, so good.
And I was sweating whether I should start Chris Hogan or Dion Lewis. Right. That ended up decision being made for me because Chris Hogan got ruled out.
15 points from Lewis. Nice day.
Yeah. Very nice day. So I'm like, I had these decisions that I was, you know, sort of sweating out there. And you know what, Stephania? It didn't matter.
It didn't.
Because Field Yates has Mr. Todd Gurley on his team, and I tweeted this out.
Is he crushing you?
Oh my, like a grape.
Like a grape.
Like a grape. I mean, it was just like, I remembered, I tweeted this out, and I felt like did you see the Floyd Mayweather Conor McGregor fight?
Yes.
And you remember Conor McGregor at the end of the fight when he was doing the interview and he just said, come on. You know, I'm doing a bad Conor McGregor here, but it was just like, you know, let me wobble back to me corner. And that's what I felt like with Todd Gurley. Like, let's stop. Let me wobble back to me corner. Like, it was just unbelievable. Just, it kept coming and coming and coming. And like, he had like 2 touchdowns in like the first 10 minutes or something like that. I'm like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. And then he gets the third one. I'm like, oh, stop it. And then the fourth one, I was just like, this is just Field like showing up. Just dancing on my grave. Just like, let me wobble back to me corner. Unbelievable performance. It did not matter what I did. I have, how much are you winning by? I have Devontae Freeman and Mike Evans on the team still to go tonight. And I need them to score how much to beat you?
74.
Yeah, 74 points. I mean, it's unbelievable.
That seems Not likely.
I mean, it's within the realm of possibility. Both of them would have to have the games of their lives.
No.
I'm
going to prep you for this right now. It ain't happening.
I need
74 points.
74
it's
points.
Not happening.
So like Todd Gurley got 44 points. So I need one of them to have a Todd Gurley 4-touchdown S game.
It's not
and then I need the other guy to have like a 150-yard. I need him to have a Julio Jones type day.
Go and start preparing yourself for tomorrow's podcast.
Of course, I've lost. I've lost.
On Gurley, the two of his touchdowns. So one, Pharoh Cooper, the Rams' outstanding return man, returns a punt about the 6-inch line. Gurley on the very next play rushes it in.
This is ridiculous.
Then how about this?
Should have been in. Pharoh Cooper should have been in.
Then 3rd and I think it was 23 from their own 43-yard line with 37 seconds left in the first half. The Rams harmlessly hand the football off to Todd Gurley. He goes untouched for 57 yards and a touchdown. Yeah. This is end of the first half. Let's just get out of here and get back and go to our halftime adjustments. Right. Robert Woods returned to this game, Stephania, and talk about a player who looked totally fine. He was fantastic.
We had this exact conversation. We said there was a reason that they held him out last week, even though he had returned to practice for one day. They wanted to give him that extra week. This week, a full participant worked with Jared Goff separately in advance of this game so that they would have their timing and such down. And obviously paid off 6 of 7, 45 yards and a touchdown. Goff only threw the ball 21 times. So essentially 30%, or a third of his throws went in the direction of Robert Woods.
Yeah, great day for Robert Woods, which meant a quieter day for other wide receivers, including Sammy Watkins and Cooper Kupp. It's a throwaway game for the Seahawks. It just was. The game got out of hand early.
Come on, Seattle, show up.
But you know something?
Do something for me.
Jimmy Graham killed me.
Tackle somebody, for the love of Pete.
A throwaway game, but it's worth noting. Jimmy Graham, just one catch on 5 targets from -1 yards over the past 2 weeks. Yikes. Again, a throwaway game. Russell Wilson gets to 11.6 fantasy points. Mike Davis gets 6 rushes for 19 yards, but he can only get 6 rushes because they were so far behind. Doug Baldwin, what did he go for yesterday? Just a total of 1 catch for 6 yards for Doug Baldwin.
Yeah. By the way, just 5 targets a game over his last 4. For whatever reason, the offense seems to be, Doug Baldwin, you still got to start him. Especially at Dallas next week. They've struggled with the slot this year, but still, this was awful. This was awful. We all had, every single person, and I didn't see, everyone had Russell Wilson as their number 1 consensus quarterback coming into this week.
Correct. That's correct. Moving along, let's get to what was anticipated to be one of the games of the day, and it certainly lived up to the hype. Patriots went to Pittsburgh to play the Steelers. Final score in dramatic fashion is 27-24. We'll get to the notable injury in just a minute, really the story of the day for fantasy football in some ways. But let's start on the New England side, and let's get this injury on the radar as well, Stephania. Rex Burkhead, who scored a touchdown, had 5 total touches, left this game with a knee injury.
Right, his left knee injured in the third quarter, walked off, and we know that doesn't necessarily mean anything. He was quickly ruled out for the remainder of the game. Per Adam Schefter, the initial test showed no ACL tear. It's not believed to be a major injury, but still one that could cost him some time. So give it a day or two for that to start to seep out. If there's anything less than a dramatic ligament tear, we're probably not going to get a ton of information from the Patriots. So I would just treat it as if it appears it's not season ending, it's good news for the Patriots.
Patriots,
go ahead.
Did clinch a playoff spot yesterday. They have now an inside track to a first round bye as well. But it sounds like there's a possibility we won't see Rex Burkhead next week against Buffalo, maybe even the week after that against the Jets.
It'll be interesting to see what the Patriots do here, if Burkhead is to miss this next game or anything. Does Dion Lewis sort of take that role over? They've been using Burkhead as sort of their goal line back. Does Mike Gillislee start becoming active?
Does he get active again?
Does he get active again? James White, does his role increase? Be interesting to see. I think, does Mike Gillislee make your waiver wire column this week? You cannot trust him in week 16. Because I expect him to be active. This is assuming Burkhead misses the next 2 weeks. If Gill, you wouldn't trust him, but is it worth grabbing him in case you play in week 17 and then you see some usage from him in week 16?
Really interesting thought. I probably will put him in there just because of this mention you just made. He did not make it at first blush, but that's a good idea.
I just sort of think, listen, if I had to rank Patriots running backs right now, I would assume Burkhead's not going to play, so I'd rank them Lewis, White, Gillislee in that order. But again, it's the Patriots, and who knows, what they will do there, especially because we also don't really know the status of Chris Hogan.
Chris Hogan, who missed this game, Stephania, kind of a surprise there. We thought maybe he would play, given that he played last Monday night, but Adam Schefter broke the news he would not play. And it sounds like this is a player that, even though he played last week and played a ton of snaps, 55 of 61, was just not himself.
He was on the field. He wasn't involved in the offense that much, at least not from a place that would be fantasy productive.
Maybe we should have been a little bit more mindful of the fact that the team signed Kenny Britt during the week. We all thought of it as like, this is just a flyer, right?
They're adding toys,
the Patriots,
right?
Right.
You know?
Instead, it ended up being, now he only played 2 snaps to Kenny Britt, but maybe it's a contingency plan.
He
in
had
case,
1 catch.
He did have a catch, but maybe it's a contingency plan in case Hogan has to miss more time going forward. Brandon Cooks, 4 catches for 60 yards. Good day for him. Tom Brady, 298 passing yards, 15.7 fantasy points. But the dominant player for them was Gronk. The best performance.
That was angry Gronk. I was out for a week. I'm back, and boy, was he
very
back.
Emotional.
Yeah.
Gronk. How many yards did he have on that one drive? It was unbelievable.
I'll tell you, for the very first and only time in his career, Gronk had exactly 69 receiving yards on that drive to help the Patriots beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. 9 catches, 168 yards, 27.8 fantasy points for Gronk. For the Steelers, though, the story of this day for them, I mean,
honestly, the story in the NFL, I would
Antonio
argue.
Brown left this game early, Stephania, and at first it looked like perhaps an ankle injury. It ended up being a left calf issue.
Right, and if you saw what happened, he sort of got his leg. It looked like it got crunched, took a hit to his leg. It was early in the second quarter, went for some x-rays, was helped off the field by 2 members of the medical staff. We didn't see him putting weight on it initially. And we heard then there was no fracture, so that there was possibility of a deep bruise. He was taken to the hospital for further evaluation and monitoring. We heard later the report from Adam Schefter. It was a partial tear in his calf muscle. And according to Schefter, per his sources, Brown is unlikely to play next week. They hope they have him for the postseason. I do have a couple people wondering, like, if it was a soft tissue injury or partial calf tear, why go to the hospital? A couple possibilities. They want to look at the imaging, but when you have bleeding in the calf area, there's a possibility of an acute situation for a compartment syndrome where you get bleeding and it just starts to create so much pressure that if you don't address it quickly, you can end up with a very serious situation that threatens the health of the leg. This happened to Hakeem Nicks back in 2011, had to have a procedure. So it sounds like they were being cautious and looking for that and potentially evaluating all the other structures in the calf. If it's a partial tear, remember, there's a range of severity even with a partial tear. It sounds dramatic, but if they're talking about him available for the postseason, tells me it can't have been that severe because calf injuries are tough to come back from. And if you're talking the postseason comes within a couple of weeks, we got 2 weeks of the regular season and then 3 weeks from now, 3-4 weeks. So, obviously these things can change and it will depend on how he heals. But for your fantasy purposes, you're not going to plan on him for the rest of the regular fantasy season.
A bummer to see. He is just a remarkable talent, the best wide receiver in football. It's just not close. Antonio Brown is so consistent. He reached 100 catches for the 5th straight year, the first player in NFL history to ever do that. And with him out, Matthew, let's operate under the presumption he does not play because remember, they need to win. They can still get the first seed in the AFC.
Right.
And they could still get the second seed in the AFC for sure. Houston and Cleveland, not particularly imposing opponents. They may say, based off what happens in week 16, they could potentially hold Antonio Brown out if they don't have. You get my point.
Yes,
they could potentially hold him out if they've clinched something or they, there are a lot of circumstances.
He is their franchise. They have Super Bowl aspirations.
Yes,
he is such a huge part of their team. They're not going to risk further injury by bringing him back early, just in terms of seeding or something like that.
Thank you for coherently saying what I could not get out right there, but. Who benefits the most? What does this mean for the pass catchers in Pittsburgh, and what does it mean for Ben Roethlisberger for these next 2 weeks?
Look, anytime you lose a player of Antonio Brown's stature, it doesn't help.
Right.
It ain't good.
Right.
I mean, let's be clear about that. So it's a hit to Ben Roethlisberger. They're on the road next week, so now you've got road Ben. It's at Houston, though, which is a secondary that struggled. So my guess is that with Antonio Brown, Ben Roethlisberger on the road is probably like a, top 5 or 6 play. Maybe he's down in the, 8 or 9 range or something like that. I think you're still starting him. My expectation is you'll lean more on Le'Veon Bell. Obviously you see an uptick in value for Juju Smith-Schuster and Martavis Bryant. Yep. I think the expectation is because of where they play that Martavis Bryant takes the bigger hit. The bigger value leap, if you will, for me. I would prefer, though, at first blush, Juju Smith-Schuster will be the highest ranked wide receiver for me over Martavis Bryant. It just feels like he's been the more consistent, the better wide receiver this year, and more of a connection with Ben Roethlisberger.
I agree there. By the way, I don't think Ben's value totally goes away. They still played really high-level football yesterday after the Antonio Brown injury, a testament to that entire offense and the coaching staff there in Pittsburgh.
Worth noting, though, I just think about this year. Think about just how crazy this year is for 1 second. The number one quarterback for a lot of drafts, Aaron Rodgers. Number one running back for a lot of drafts, David Johnson. Number one wide receiver for a lot of drafts, obviously, Antonio Brown. Number one tight end, Rob Gronkowski. All have missed some, if not a majority of games this year. It's just been an awful year for injuries.
No doubt about that. Stephania, San Francisco 49ers get their fourth win in 5 tries that we talked about earlier on in the show. For Tennessee, a couple of surprise performances. Marcus Mariota, 18 fantasy points. He looked much better.
He didn't look terrible.
He looked better, though. He
definitely looked better. He looked better. You know me.
23 for 33,
I'm so anti.
2 touchdowns, 241 passing yards. Rashard Matthews was the big benefactor yesterday. 6 catches, 95 yards, and a touchdown. We have been saying that going into the playoffs, Delaney Walker was a Titan you could trust. 5 catches, 37 yards, and a score. Him, Rashard Matthews, I suppose. Those are the 2 guys. Like, Matthews has a little bit more risk baked in because he has been a little bit more up and down than Walker, and Walker plays a much shallower position in terms of options. Running backs couldn't get much going. This is the Titans, man. Tough team to watch some Sundays on offense.
Oofa. That's the nicest thing anyone said about the Titans.
The 49ers, though, are very fun to watch all of a sudden. Jimmy Garoppolo in 3 starts for the 49ers.
Jimmy G. Niner up!
In 3 starts, he now has 1,008 passing yards. The 49ers have won all 3 of those games. 381 yards yesterday. A touchdown pass to Garrett Selleck. He has been fantastic, has Jimmy Garoppolo for the 49ers. 19.6 fantasy points. Before I go out there and tell you to rush to the waiver wire to grab him, here's the issue. They play the Jaguars next week. So I don't think for fantasy purposes you're going to have any chance of starting him next week, Matthew, but what a good story here. He has been unbelievable. You have found yourself a quarterback, Stephania. The good vibes have really started to roll right now in San Francisco.
Well, obviously I'm completely biased.
Oh, sure.
Loving this, and all of my fellow Bay Area folks who are super excited about him there. But what stood out to me is now you're seeing some of the players. Jerry Rice tweets out yesterday. Mm-hmm. Jimmy Garoppolo makes everyone better around him. Good luck today and get that W. So that was before the game. Imagine what they're thinking after. I mean, I think these dynasty players, remember when they were there to honor, Dwight Clark.
Dwight Clark,
for the catch.
Yeah.
That day was one of the most pathetic 49er performances. It was just so unfortunate. All these greats were around, and it just felt so off to have all these greats that were in that 49ers dynasty, and there to honor Dwight Clark, and the 49ers were just embarrassing themselves on the field, and now they can feel much, much better about the direction. It looks great.
No, the whole team it's amazing the difference a player can make. I saw on Instagram Drake was wearing a Niners jersey yesterday. It's very exciting.
Not bad. Marquise Goodwin was great yesterday for the 49ers. 10 catches for 114 yards on 13 targets. If you played him in your flex spot yesterday, you made a very wise decision. He's going to probably be somewhere, a really difficult matchup next week, but he won't be on the flex radar next week against Jacksonville.
16.5 fantasy points in 4 of the last 5, and including 3 straight. He was somebody who had made the love list and obviously connected.
Carlos Hyde, 16 for 25, so a tough day running the football, just 5.9 points for him yesterday. But again, good times are rolling right now.
And the Titans have a really good run defense, in fairness to him. But real quickly, before we move off the 49ers, Robbie Gould has been nothing short of amazing. He's available in about 54% of leagues. I would humbly suggest he makes your waiver wire column. I know it's a kicker, but 15, 17, 24 points.
I'm with
Guys,
you,
just been money in the bank. You think about the kind of difference Greg Zuerlein has made for a lot of fantasy teams this year. Robbie Gould is doing the same thing over the last couple of weeks here, and certainly at home against the Jaguars, you could see even more potential opportunities for Robbie Gould to kick some field goals.
Not a bad call.
That last field goal that he kicked to win it won me a playoff game.
Congratulations to you. We move along to the last game of the night. A crazy finish between the Raiders and the Cowboys.
Oh my
gosh. The Cowboys win 20-17. For those who may have missed it, the game ended with a couple of bizarre plays. The sneak attempt by Dak was so close.
Right.
They literally had to get an index card out from the pocket of the referee to see if it had been A first down or not. Anyway,
I honestly thought he had it. Like, I didn't think it was that close with that second push that he got up or whatever.
Sure. Beyond that, Derek Carr, on an attempt to win the game, dives for the pylon, and that rule where if a player fumbles the ball and it rolls into the end zone, it is a touchback and a turned over ball. The other team takes over. So anyways, 20-17 is the final score. So 20-17 is the final between the Cowboys and the Raiders. Dak Prescott yesterday goes for 13.7 fantasy points. Still wasn't great from Dak. 2 interceptions. Zeke Elliott returns in week 16. Perhaps that changes everything for Dak and his outlook.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's exactly right.
Yeah, I think so as well. Des Bryant, 2 for 59 yesterday. Pretty blah day overall for Dallas. Again, not a throwaway game per se, but everything changes when Zeke returns. He is back off suspension next week. This is a goofy stat line from Michael Crabtree for the Raiders. 17 targets yesterday. Just 39 receiving yards, but he had 7 catches and 2 touchdowns, good for 22.9 fantasy points for the Raiders. It's a pretty chalky outcome all the way around, right? Derek Carr actually was okay. 2 touchdown passes, 47 rushing yards.
He
for
didn't
him.
look great. I mean, like, it's been a tough year for Derek Carr, and people have been in and out of the offense here. Yeah, but it's fine.
Yeah,
it was to your point. It's a weird game. Also, of course, Derek Carr, probably should have had 2 more fantasy points. He loses that fumble, out of the end zone, at the end of the game. The touchback.
Exactly. Yeah. So Marshawn Lynch rushes 16 times for 76 yards, adds 3 catches for 16 yards, good for 12.2 fantasy points.
One of my fantasy playoffs, I was up going to, I had this epic battle in one of my leagues. I have Kareem Hunt and Alvin Kamara and Robbie Gould. I mean, I put up 171 points in this league. Unbelievable. The guy I'm playing had Todd Gurley. So, I mean, and he had Rashard Matthews and all of his guys went off as well. So I'm up 14 going into Sunday night. I'm done. He's got Marshawn Lynch, PPR scoring, and I am sweating this out point by point by point. He winds up with 12.2, but if you watch that game, there was a stretch there for basically almost the fourth quarter where Lynch was just sort of stuck there. And if all they took was one dump off pass to Lynch and he was in the entire last drive, I'm like, oh, please, just anyone. And then, and then ultimately they get down close. I'm like, oh, they're going to score. They're going to try to give it to him. And then somehow, of course, that fumble happens and I managed to squeak out with a 1.8 point win, 171 to 169.2 or something like that. Just an unbelievable battle surviving Todd Gurley. Not the easiest thing in the world.
Coming up on tomorrow's show, we will recap Monday Night Football, give you some waiver wire ads of note, some injury update from Stephania. Plus, does Matthew pull off a miracle on the Monday Night Football variety?
Just let me wobble back to me corner. Let me wobble back to me corner.
In the meantime, find Stephania on Instagram, StephaniaB87, and on Twitter, Stephania_ESPN. Matthew Berry is Matthew Berry TMR on every form of social media, except for the Fantasy Life app. Just Matthew Berry there.
Yes, I am. I'm at Matthew Berry on the Fantasy Life app. I am Matthew Berry TMR on all forms of social media. But my question for you, Field Yates, where you're at Field Yates.
Yes.
And we can find you, of course, at runfieldrun.com. The fastest beer mile on record right now is 4:33.6, right? 4 minutes, 33 seconds, 0.6 of a second, by a man named Corey Bellamore. Could you do that? Could you beat that beer mile? 4.33?
I couldn't bike a mile in 4:33.
Wow, okay.
Much less run a mile in 4:33, much less do a beer mile in 4:33.
I'm not sure I could drink a beer in 4 minutes and 33 seconds, to be honest.
Oh, Matthew. Showing your age, buddy.
Yeah, that's right. I'm a sipper.
We're back tomorrow.
Peace out.
The theme song of the Fantasy Focus was created and performed by Eric Hutchinson. Check out more of his music at erichutchinson.com. Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Focus Football Podcast. For more great podcasts, listen on the ESPN app or subscribe on iTunes.
You can always count on Bud Light, just like you can always count on Always Game Gary. No bar is too far. No wing sauce is too hot. Not for Gary. Always Game Gary is famous among friends. He deserves a Bud Light. Enjoy responsibly. Bud Light Beer, AB St. Louis, Missouri.